The chamber fell silent as Ambassador Galarex rose from his seat, his translucent membranes fluttering nervously along his neck. The Galactic High Council, representatives of over 300 sentient species across the known universe, watched with a mixture of apprehension and curiosity. Emergency sessions were rare, and this one had been called with the highest priority designation. "Esteemed colleagues," Galarex began, his voice calm despite the gravity of the situation. "Our deep space monitoring stations have detected an unregistered faster-than-light signal approaching the outer borders of Federation space. We have confirmed that the vessel originates from a previously quarantined system." A holographic display materialized in the center of the circular chamber, showing a star system with a particularly hostile-looking planet. The visual data indicated extreme radiation levels, violent geological activity, and atmospheric composition that would be lethal to most species present. "This," Galarex continued, "is what our classification system designates as a Deathworld. Category 12 on our planetary hazard scale, which, as you know, was previously thought to be theoretical. No sentient species has been documented evolving from such environments." Admiral Marenk, the Federation's Chief of Defense, leaned forward. His chitin plating clicked nervously as he spoke. "And you're suggesting that whatever is piloting that vessel evolved on this Hell's Cape?" "Precisely, Admiral. Our initial scans indicate biological signatures unlike anything in our database. They appear to have developed FTL technology centuries ahead of our projected timeline for such a hostile environment. The implications are concerning." Dr. Sorovia, the Federation's leading xenobiologist, activated her communication panel. The avian scientist's feathers were ruffled in what those familiar with her species recognized as intense scientific excitement. "The evolutionary pressures on such a world would create adaptations beyond our comprehension," she trilled. "Resistance to extreme radiation, biological defense systems against toxins, physical durability that might seem impossible. These creatures would have survived planetary conditions that would annihilate most of us within minutes." The council chamber erupted in overlapping conversations, various species communicating in their native tongues while translation devices struggled to keep up. Fear was the predominant emotion. Fear of the unknown, fear of something potentially more dangerous than anything they had encountered in their centuries of peaceful cooperation. Admiral Marenk slammed his reinforced appendage against the table. "We must prepare our defense fleets. If these Deathworlders have developed spacefaring capabilities and found us, they could represent an existential threat to the entire Federation." "Let's not jump to conclusions," countered Ambassador Zorl, representative of the methane-breathing Quizorians. "We have no evidence of hostile intent. Our first contact protocols exist for precisely such situations." The debate continued, growing more heated by the minute. Proposals ranging from immediate military mobilization to diplomatic overtures were put forward, each with passionate advocates. It was Dr. Sorovia who brought a semblance of order back to the proceedings. "Colleagues, before we decide on any course of action, perhaps we should review what we know about their planet in detail. Our stellar cartography has some limited data on their system." The holographic display changed to show a more detailed orbital scan of the Deathworld. Mountain ranges that would dwarf anything on Federation worlds. Oceans that periodically boiled from underwater volcanic activity. Atmospheric storms that could strip the flesh from most Federation species. And most disturbing of all, evidence of predatory megafauna that defied conventional ecological models. Apex predators that seem to have evolved specifically to hunt other apex predators in an endless cycle of escalating biological weaponry. "By the void," whispered a council member. "How could anything sentient evolve in such conditions?" Dr. Sorovia's eyes gleamed with professional fascination. "That's precisely what makes them so remarkable. They didn't just survive. They developed civilization, technology, art, and ultimately space travel. They mastered their environment rather than being crushed by it." Admiral Marenk was about to respond when an urgent communication interrupted the proceedings. A junior officer, visibly distressed, projected into the chamber. Counselors, we've received a direct transmission from the unidentified vessel. They've entered Federation space and are requesting permission to dock. They say they come in peace and wish to establish diplomatic relations. The silence that followed was absolute. It was broken by the slow, deliberate voice of the council elder who had remained quiet until now. It seems, the ancient being said, that our theoretical discussions have just become very practical. Prepare our diplomatic reception areas, and perhaps our containment protocols as well. We're about to meet the strongest Deathworld species in the galaxy. The Federation's primary diplomatic docking station, Harmony Nexus, had never seemed so tense. Security personnel from a dozen species lined the corridors, armed with weapons designed to incapacitate virtually any known form of life. Medical teams stood by with universal quarantine fields, and xenobiologists fidgeted with their scanning equipment. The Deathworlder ship had caused quite a stir upon arrival. Rather than the sleek, aesthetically pleasing vessels typical of Federation design, their craft appeared almost cobbled together, a patchwork of materials showing clear signs of meteor impacts, radiation burns, and hasty repairs. To Federation engineers, it looked dangerously unreliable. To military analysts, it spoke of a species that had endured countless battles and adapted their technology accordingly. "They're docking now," announced the station's commander. "Atmospheric analysis shows their ship contains elements toxic to most of our species. They've agreed to use our standard airlock decontamination protocols." Ambassador Galarex stood at the front of the reception committee, trying to project calm confidence. "Remember, no sudden movements. Our translators have been calibrated to their communications, but cultural misunderstandings are still possible." The massive airlock door cycled through its decontamination sequence, emitting a series of soft hisses. Then, with a final clunk of heavy machinery, it began to slide open. The assembled Federation representatives collectively held their breath, each imagining what horrors might emerge from a Category 12 Deathworld. What stepped through the airlock was unexpected. Instead of the monstrous behemoths they had braced themselves for, the Deathworlders appeared almost elegant, taller than most Federation species, but slender and graceful in their movements. Their bodies were covered in a fascinating combination of scales and what appeared to be a type of fur, creating an iridescent pattern across their exposed skin. They wore practical, form-fitting garments with what appeared to be lightweight armor integrated at strategic points. Most striking were their eyes, large, alert, and radiating an unmistakable intelligence. The Deathworlder at the front of their delegation stepped forward, making a fluid gesture with all four of their upper limbs that somehow managed to convey both respect and confidence. "Greetings, representatives of the Galactic Federation." The translator converted their complex vocalizations. "I am Varisa, diplomatic envoy of the Zelthari people. We come in peace, seeking friendship and exchange of knowledge." The voice was melodious despite the translator's synthetic tones, and the words were precisely the opposite of what most had expected. Ambassador Galarex recovered first, performing his species' traditional greeting gesture. "On behalf of the Galactic Federation, I welcome you to Harmony Nexus. We are pleased to establish peaceful contact with your people." A smaller Deathworlder stepped forward, this one with more vibrant scaling patterns that seemed to shift colors slightly as they moved. "I am Reek, cultural attaché. We have brought tokens of friendship from our homeworld of Zelth. Nothing dangerous, I assure you. At least, not dangerous to us." The last comment was accompanied by what the translation algorithms interpreted as humor. The Federation security team tensed noticeably. Varisa made a sound that the translators didn't fully process, possibly a sign of amusement or mild exasperation. "My colleague's humor sometimes translates poorly. What Reek means is that we understand our world may be considered extreme by your standards. We have been observing your communications for some time and have prepared accordingly." This revelation sent a ripple of concern through the Federation delegates. They had been observed? For how long? Admiral Marank, who had insisted on being present, stepped forward. Your technology must be quite advanced to have intercepted and decoded our secure communications. Varisa tilted her head in what might have been acknowledgement. Not particularly. Your signals are quite distinctive against the cosmic background. As for decoding, well, mathematics is universal, isn't it? Once we understood your binary systems, the rest was fairly straightforward pattern recognition. Dr. Sarovia could no longer contain her scientific curiosity. If I may ask, how have you adapted to the environmental conditions of your homeworld? Our data indicates radiation levels that should prevent complex organic life, let alone technological civilization. Reek seemed delighted by the question. An excellent query. Our cellular structure incorporates radiation-absorbing compounds that actually convert certain types of radiation into biochemical energy. What you might consider lethal, we find refreshing. As for the environmental extremes, the supervolcanic eruptions of the last great cycle helped our species develop rapid adaptability. Supervolcanic eruptions? One of the security officers whispered, horrified. Oh yes, Reed continued enthusiastically. The cataclysm of the Seventh Age covered nearly a quarter of our planet in ash and molten stone. Those were festival days. The skyfire patterns were spectacular for decades afterward. The Federation delegates exchanged alarmed glances. These beings considered planetary-scale disasters as occasions for celebration. Varisa, seeming to sense their discomfort, intervened smoothly. What my colleague means to express is that our species has learned to thrive amid challenges that might seem daunting to others. It has shaped our philosophy and culture in unique ways. Ambassador Galarex seized on this diplomatic opening. Cultural exchange is a cornerstone of Federation relationships. Perhaps you would join us for a more formal reception, where we can discuss your world and ours in a more comfortable setting. We would be honored, Varisa replied. Though I should mention that what we find comfortable might differ substantially from your preferences. We've studied your environmental parameters and can adjust accordingly. As the delegation moved toward the station's central reception hall, Admiral Marank hung back, speaking quietly into his communication device. Double the security detail, and have the research team analyze everything. Their ship, their garments, even the air they breathe. I don't trust this peaceful facade. Dr. Sarovia, overhearing him, whispered back. Or perhaps they genuinely are peaceful, Admiral. Not everything that evolves in harsh conditions develops aggressive tendencies. Sometimes, cooperation becomes the superior survival strategy. I'm not willing to bet the safety of the Federation on evolutionary theory, Doctor, the Admiral replied grimly. Not when it comes to creatures that call supervolcanic eruptions festival days. The Grand Reception Hall of Harmony Nexus had been hastily adapted to accommodate both the Federation delegates and their unexpected Deathworld guests. Environmental controls have been adjusted to create zones of comfort for various physiologies, and a central diplomatic table was laden with carefully analyzed samples of cuisine from dozens of worlds, none of which, the Federation scientists nervously noted, seemed likely to appeal to beings evolved on a Category 12 death world. Varisa and her delegation had been remarkably accommodating, seemingly fascinated by everything around them. They politely declined most offered refreshments, explaining that they had brought their own sustenance. A precautionary measure, Varisa explained. Our biochemistry is adapted to substances that might be harmful to your systems. Similarly, we find most Federation foodstuffs lacking in certain nutrients essential to our metabolism. Reek, who had been enthusiastically documenting everything with some sort of recording device, produced a sealed container from their equipment. However, we have brought something that our xenobiologists believe might be safely shared, a diluted version of a common Zelthari seasoning. The container was carefully passed to Dr. Sarovia's research team, who subjected it to immediate analysis. After several tense minutes, the lead researcher reported back. It contains compounds similar to capsaicin, but with a molecular structure we've never encountered. There are also trace elements that would be mildly toxic to most Federation species, though not in immediately dangerous concentrations. Toxic, gasped one of the diplomats. Reek made that untranslatable sound again, definitely amusement. Merely stimulating to our palates. On Zelth, this would be considered extremely mild, suitable for younglings taking their first nutrition outside of the hatching creches. Several Federation representatives visibly recoiled at the implications. Ambassador Galarex, ever the diplomat, steered the conversation towards safer territory. Perhaps you could tell us more about your journey here? We were surprised to detect your vessel so suddenly. Our propulsion system utilizes principles that minimize detectable emissions until the final approach, Varisa explained. A necessary development on our world, where being noticed by certain predator species often meant destruction. We've carried this philosophy into our technological development. Predators? Inquired a previously silent security officer. What sort of predators would threaten a space-faring civilization? Oh, the great devourers haven't been a serious threat since we domesticated them, Reek said casually. Now, they're primarily companions and assistance creatures. Some families still keep them for traditional hunts, though that practice has become more ceremonial than practical. The security officer paled visibly. You? Domesticated apex predators from a Category 12 Deathworld. Of course, Reek replied, as if it were the most natural thing in the universe. They're remarkably intelligent once you establish proper communication protocols, and their ability to detect spatial-temporal anomalies makes them excellent early warning systems for cosmic disturbances. Dr. Sorovia leaned forward, utterly captivated. Would it be possible to see images of these creatures? For scientific purposes, naturally. Varisa exchanged glances with Reek, then nodded. We see no harm in that. Reek activated a holographic projector, and the image that appeared in the center of the reception hall caused several Federation representatives to involuntarily retreat from the table. The creature displayed was massive, combining features that seemed deliberately engineered for maximum lethality. Multiple rows of serrated appendages, sensory organs that appeared capable of detecting the slightest movement, and a biological structure that somehow looked both armored and frighteningly agile. This is a juvenile greater devourer, Reek explained proudly. My own companion. Actually, her name translates roughly to gentle morning breeze, though that loses some of the poetic nuance of our language. There is nothing remotely gentle about the monstrosity projected before them. It looked capable of tearing through the hull of a Federation cruiser. And this is a companion animal, Ambassador Galarex asked weakly. Indeed, she's been with me since my 10th cycle. Quite playful, though sometimes overly enthusiastic during recreational activities. The implications of what might constitute play for such a creature hung unspoken in the air. The increasingly tense atmosphere was suddenly interrupted by an urgent communication. The station commander's voice echoed through the reception hall. Ambassador Galarex, we have an unscheduled arrival approaching the station. Another vessel has entered Federation space and is requesting docking privileges. Another Zelthari ship? The ambassador asked, glancing at Varisa. The Deathworlder appeared equally surprised. We dispatched no additional vessels. Our delegation represents the full diplomatic mission. Admiral Marenk immediately went on alert. Configuration of the approaching vessel? Weapon status. The commander's voice returned, sounding perplexed. It's not matching any known design parameters. Admiral. Smaller than the Zelthari vessel, with an unusual propulsion signature. Preliminary scans indicate. This can't be right. The system is identifying it as originating from another Deathworld categorization. A murmur of alarm spread through the Federation representatives. Another Deathworld species? Dr. Sorovia whispered. 2 first contacts in 1 cycle. Admiral Marenk's posture became rigid. Security alert. All personnel to containment positions. Ambassador, I strongly recommend postponing any further diplomatic discussions until we understand what we're dealing with. Varisa and her delegation observed the sudden activity with calm interest. Perhaps, she suggested, this is an opportunity rather than a threat. The universe seems to be bringing together its most resilient children. The holographic display shifted to show the approaching vessel. Unlike the practical, battle-scar design of the Zelthari ship, this new arrival appeared almost haphazard, a cobbled-together collection of different materials and technologies, painted in bright colors with what appeared to be decorative patterns along its hull. "Our sensors are detecting the planet of origin," announced the station commander. "It's Category 9+. Another death world, though not quite as extreme as Zelth." "Category 9+?" Dr. Sorovia repeated. "That's still well beyond what we considered viable for technological civilization." The cosmic irony is remarkable. After millennia, without contacting any death world species, we encounter two within the same cycle. Ambassador Galarex looked from the holographic display to the Zelthari delegation and back again. An inexplicable feeling of cosmic significance, or perhaps impending doom, settled over the reception hall. "It seems," he said carefully, "that the Federation is about to make the acquaintance of yet another species from hell." The second airlock cycling sequence seemed to take an eternity. The Federation security forces had been doubled, weapons primed and ready. Even the Zelthari delegation had been moved to a position where they could observe the new arrival from a safe distance, though they appeared more curious than concerned. "I note that your security forces seem quite agitated," Varisa commented to Ambassador Galarex. "On Zelth, we would consider such a display either a challenge or a great honor." "It's merely a precaution," Galarex replied diplomatically. "Two unexpected first contacts in rapid succession is unprecedented in Federation history." Varisa made a gesture of understanding. "The unknown can be disturbing. We Zelthari have a saying, 'Fear is the mind's way of preparing the body for evolution.'" Before Galarex could parse the philosophical implications of this statement, the airlock completed its final decontamination cycle. The massive doors began apart. The assembled Federation representatives collectively braced themselves, now unsure what to expect. Would these new Deathworlders resemble the elegant, scaled Zelthari, or would they match the original nightmarish expectations? What emerged through the airlock was neither. The beings that stepped onto the station were bipedal and of moderate height, lacking both the imposing stature of the Zelthari and any obvious defensive adaptations. No scales, no armored plating, no visible specialized appendages for combat. They appeared almost vulnerable. Most shocking was their exposed skin, smooth, seemingly unprotected, with only thin coverings of fabric over certain portions of their bodies. Their faces bore expressions that the Federation's xenopsychologists would later identify as casual friendliness. The lead figure, a female of their species with dark skin and curly hair pulled back in a practical arrangement, stepped forward with a disarmingly wide facial expression. "Hello there," she called out, as the translators struggled to process her language. "Captain Alicia Carter of the Earth vessel Curiosity. Hope we're not interrupting anything important." The casual greeting, so at odds with the formal protocols of both the Federation and the Zelthari, created a moment of confused silence. Captain Carter seemed unfazed by the reception. She glanced around at the assembled security forces, the diplomatic delegation, and the observing Zelthari. "Quite a welcome committee. We picked up your communication signals a while back and thought we'd drop by to say hi. Are those guys with the scales friends of yours? Or did we crash a private party?" Ambassador Galarex struggled to regain his diplomatic composure. "Captain Carter, I am Ambassador Galarex of the Galactic Federation. We welcome you to Harmony Nexus. These are representatives of the Zelthari people, who have also recently made contact with our civilization." Captain Carter's eyes lit up with interest as she surveyed the Zelthari delegation. "Another new species? That's fantastic. Hello, Zelthari folks. Love the iridescent scale patterns. Very stylish." From behind Captain Carter, more humans emerged, each carrying what appeared to be containers of various sizes. One of them, a broad-shouldered man with a neatly trimmed beard, stepped forward. "We brought gifts," he announced cheerfully. "Standard Earth diplomatic protocol. We've got coffee, some decent whiskey, chewing gum, and a few other Earth delicacies. Nothing fancy, but it's the thought that counts, right? The Federation security team remained tense, scanners working overtime to analyze these strange new beings and their mysterious gifts. Varisa, to everyone's surprise, approached the human delegation with open curiosity. Your species evolved on a high-gravity, radiation-exposed planet with extreme temperature variations and aggressive predator species, yet you appear to have minimal biological defenses. Fascinating adaptation strategy. Captain Carter blinked, then laughed. Well, when you put it like that, Earth does sound pretty rough. But we manage, mostly by being clever and stubborn as hell. You must be from a pretty intense place yourself, with those gorgeous scales. Radiation protection. Indeed, Varisa confirmed. Among other functions, your analytical capabilities are impressive. Nah, just a good guesser, Carter replied modestly. So what's the procedure here? Formal diplomatic stuff first. Or can we crack open some of this whiskey and get to know each other? Admiral Marank, who had been observing with increasing disbelief, finally intervened. Captain Carter, I must insist that your gifts be thoroughly analyzed before anyone consumes them. Standard safety protocols. The bearded human shrugged good-naturedly. Knock yourselves out. Though I gotta warn you, the coffee might give some of you a buzz depending on your biochemistry. Caffeine's a mild stimulant for us, but who knows what it'll do for different physiologies. Dr. Sorovia, who could no longer contain her scientific curiosity, approached with scanning equipment. Captain, if I may ask, your planet was identified as Category 9+ on our hazard scale. That's an environment we previously believed incompatible with advanced civilization. How did your species overcome such conditions? Captain Carter exchanged amused glances with her crew. Overcome? I don't know if that's the right word. We just sort of roll with it. Ice ages, supervolcanoes, meteor impacts. Earth throws a lot at you, but humans are pretty good at adapting. We build shelters, make tools, help each other out. Basic survival stuff. Reek, who had been observing the humans with increasing interest, approached. You mentioned predator species on your world. Have you domesticated them as well? Some of them, replied one of the human crew members, a woman with short blonde hair. Dogs, cats, a few exotic pets. Most of the really dangerous, ones we just try to give plenty of space. Though there's always some adrenaline junkie who thinks it's a good idea to swim with sharks or wrestle alligators. Wrestle alligators? Repeated a Federation security officer, the translation causing a momentary glitch as the system struggled to find appropriate conceptual matches. Yeah, it's a thing some people do, Captain Carter said with a dismissive wave. Personally, I prefer extreme mountain climbing or deep-sea diving. Less chance of getting bitten, more chance of experiencing something beautiful before potentially falling to your death. This casual reference to recreational, life-threatening activities caused visible distress among the Federation representatives. Even more surprising was the reaction from the Zelthri delegation. They appeared impressed. Varisa tilted her head toward Captain Carter. Your species deliberately seeks out danger. For enjoyment. Sure, Carter replied. Skydiving, bungee jumping, free solo climbing. The riskier, the better for some folks. Helps you feel alive, you know, and makes for great social media content. For the first time, the Zelthri seemed genuinely surprised. Varisa and Reek exchanged what appeared to be significant glances. Remarkable, Varisa finally said. On Zelth, we face sufficient environmental hazards in daily life that we rarely need to manufacture additional ones. Your species' psychological structure must be quite unique. Ambassador Galarex, sensing an opportunity to regain control of the increasingly chaotic first contact scenario, cleared his throat. Perhaps we should continue these fascinating cultural exchanges in a more structured environment. The Federation has prepared facilities for formal diplomatic discussions. Sounds good to me, Captain Carter agreed cheerfully. Though I hope there's time for some informal cultural exchange too. Nothing builds inter-species bonds like sharing a drink and swapping stories. As the now expanded delegation began moving toward the diplomatic chambers, Admiral Marank pulled Ambassador Galarex aside. "This is unprecedented," the Admiral hissed. Two Deathworld species, both apparently peaceful, both arriving virtually simultaneously? I cannot believe this is coincidence. Galarex watched as Captain Carter engaged Varisa in animated conversation, the human gesturing expressively, while the Zelthri listened with obvious interest. "Coincidence or not, Admiral," Galarex replied quietly, "I believe the galaxy just became a significantly more complicated place." The formal diplomatic reception had quickly evolved into something the Federation protocol officers would later struggle to classify in their reports. The stiff, carefully choreographed event had transformed into what Captain Carter casually referred to as a mixer, a concept that required extensive explanation to both Federation and Zelthri representatives. In one corner of the vast chamber, Dr. Sorovia was conducting impromptu comparative physiological discussions with volunteers from both Deathworld delegations. Her feathers were fully fluffed in scientific excitement as she documented her findings. "Extraordinary," she exclaimed, reviewing the data from her most recent scan. "Human cellular structures show remarkable DNA repair mechanisms, not as advanced as Zelthri radiation resistance, but impressively adaptive. And your endurance capabilities. Your cardiovascular system appears designed for persistent pursuit rather than burst speed or strength." "Persistence hunting," nodded the human volunteer, a tall woman from Carter's crew. "It's how our ancestors caught prey. We're not the strongest or fastest, but we just keep going until other animals collapse from exhaustion." Nearby, Reek was demonstrating what appeared to be a recreational activity from Zelth, involving complex patterns of movement that resembled both a martial art and a dance. Several human crew members were attempting to follow along, with varying degrees of success. "The key," Reek explained patiently, "is to imagine the ground beneath you could liquefy at any moment. Constant readiness for environmental shift is central to Zelthri philosophy. Kind of like surfing on lava," one of the humans suggested, executing a particularly fluid transition that earned an appreciative click from Reek. "Except, we can't actually touch lava without getting crispy. Your adaptation through technology rather than biology is fascinating," Reek commented. "We developed heat-resistant dermal layers. You invented heat-resistant suits. Different solutions to similar problems." At the center of the chamber, Captain Carter and Varisa had established an impromptu cultural exchange, surrounded by curious Federation representatives who couldn't quite believe what they were witnessing. "So you're saying," Varisa clarified, "that humans deliberately confine themselves in small fabric enclosures on the sides of frozen mountains for enjoyment. Camping. It's great," Carter enthused. "Nothing like battling the elements to make you appreciate a hot shower afterward. Though I guess with your built-in environmental protections, it wouldn't be much of a challenge." Varisa made the now familiar sound of Zelthri amusement. "We have similar practices, though for us, the challenge lies in navigating the burning plains during storm season. The electrical discharges create beautiful patterns while testing one's reflexes." "Lightning dodging?" Carter grinned. "That sounds awesome. We got storm chasers on Earth who'd love to compare notes." Throughout these exchanges, Admiral Marenk continued to observe with suspicious intensity. He approached Ambassador Galarex, who was attempting to process the unprecedented diplomatic situation. "This cannot be natural," the Admiral insisted quietly. "Humans deliberately seek out survival challenges for fun. Zelthri consider planetary disasters to be festivals. Both evolved on worlds that should have prevented intelligent life. Yet here they are, casually discussing their death-defying recreational activities like old friends." Galarex had to admit the Admiral had a point. The ease with which these two completely different species from entirely separate death worlds had connected was remarkable, and perhaps concerning. If they formed an alliance, the ambassador's worrying was interrupted by a sudden commotion. One of the Federation security officers had apparently accepted a small sample of the Zelthri mild seasoning, despite all protocols. The unfortunate officer was now making distress sounds, surrounded by concerned colleagues, while a medical team rushed forward. "Oh dear," Reek said, genuinely apologetic. "I did mention it was diluted for non-Zelthri consumption, but perhaps not enough." Captain Carter approached, surveying the situation. "What's in that stuff anyway? Looks like our friend is having a pretty strong reaction." Reek explained the complex chemical composition, which meant nothing to the humans until one of Carter's crew, a woman with scientific insignia, gasped in recognition. "That sounds like a super concentrated capsaicin variant. Seriously hot chili peppers, basically." Carter's expression brightened. "Oh, is that all? Can I try some?" The entire Federation delegation froze in horror. Even Varisa looked concerned. "Captain, this substance has caused a severe inflammatory response in a species with significant chemical resistances," Ambassador Galarex warned. "For your own safety." But Carter had already accepted a tiny portion from Reek and placed it on her tongue. The Federation representatives watched in morbid fascination, expecting immediate distress. Instead, the human captain's eyes widened, and she made an appreciative sound. "Wow, that's got a kick to it. Reminds me of ghost peppers back home, maybe with a metallic aftertaste. Nice heat level. Will be great on tacos." Reek and Varisa exchanged looks of genuine astonishment. "You find this pleasant?" Varisa asked carefully. "Well, pleasant might be stretching it," Carter laughed, her eyes watering slightly. "But humans love spicy food. Capsaicin triggers pain receptors, but many of us enjoy that sensation when it comes from food. Cultural thing, I guess." While this exchange was occurring, a different sort of challenge was developing across the chamber. One of the bullier human crew members had been engaged in what started as a friendly demonstration of Earth martial arts with a Zelthri security attaché. What began as a casual exchange of techniques had gradually escalated into something more competitive. A small crowd had gathered, Federation representatives watching with a mixture of concern and fascination as the human, physically smaller and without obvious defensive adaptations, held his own against the clearly stronger, armored Zelthri. "Your technique is impressive," the Zelthri commented, recovering from a well-executed throw. "You compensate for physical limitations with leverage and precision." "It's all about using your opponent's strength against them," the human replied, circling carefully. "When you're from a planet where everything can kill you, you learn to get creative." The Zelthri moved with blinding speed, executing a complex attack sequence that should have overwhelmed the human. Instead, the crew member dropped low, used the Zelthri's momentum, and executed a perfect judo throw that sent the much heavier alien tumbling across the floor. A stunned silence fell across the chamber. The Zelthri rose slowly, plates shifting as they reassessed the human. Then, to everyone's surprise, they made the untranslatable sound of amusement. "Magnificent," the Zelthri declared. "Such efficiency of movement. You must teach me this technique." Rather than being offended at being bested, the Deathworlders seemed genuinely delighted by the experience. The human, looking relieved, offered a hand to help them up, a gesture the Zelthri mimicked after a moment's consideration. Admiral Marenk had seen enough. He approached Ambassador Galarex urgently. "Do you understand what we're witnessing?" he demanded in a harsh whisper. "Two Deathworld species, finding common ground in there. Their insanity. The Zelthri with their biological weapons and disaster festivals. The humans with their deliberate danger-seeking and inexplicable ability to enjoy toxic substances. If they ally, they seem to be doing exactly that," Galarex observed as Captain Carter and Varisa continued their animated conversation, now sampling the humans' offering of coffee with equal curiosity. "Ambassador," the Admiral's chitin clicked rapidly in agitation. "We must consider strategic implications. One Deathworld species joining the Federation was unexpected but manageable. Two of them, possibly forming their own alliance within our borders." "Admiral," Galarex interrupted gently, "perhaps we're approaching this from the wrong perspective. Rather than seeing threats, consider the possibilities. Two species that have mastered the most hostile environments in the galaxy, both apparently interested in peaceful contact rather than conquest." Before the Admiral could respond, Captain Carter's voice rose above the general conversation. Hey, everyone, Varisa and I have been talking, and we've got a proposal. Instead of everyone being nervous about the scary Deathworlders, how about we focus on what we can offer each other? Earth has plenty of experience with adaptive technology, and from what Varisa tells me, the Zelthri have mastered biological engineering that could benefit everyone. Varisa nodded in agreement. The Federation represents diverse worlds and perspectives that both our peoples could learn from. Perhaps rather than fearing our evolutionary differences, we might celebrate what they enable us to contribute. The chamber fell silent as the Federation representatives considered this unexpected development. It was Dr. Sorovia who broke the silence. "They're right," she said, her scientific enthusiasm overcoming protocol. From a purely evolutionary perspective, both humans and Zelthri represent success stories we never thought possible. Their adaptations, biological and technological, could revolutionize our understanding of survival in extreme conditions. Admiral Marenk didn't look convinced. "That's precisely my concern. Their adaptations make them potentially unstoppable if they ever decided to." "To what, Admiral?" Captain Carter interrupted, her tone still friendly, but with a new firmness. "Conquer the galaxy? If we wanted to do that, we wouldn't announce ourselves diplomatically. Both our species evolved on planets that try to kill us every day. You know what that teaches you? The value of cooperation." Varisa nodded in agreement. The Zelthri learned early in our evolution that individual strength means little against planetary cataclysms. Only by forming communities and developing shared technologies did we survive. We seek the Federation's friendship precisely because we understand the power of mutual support. The human with the scientific insignia stepped forward. "Look, I get the concern. We're unknown quantities to you. But consider this. Earth has thousands of distinct cultures, philosophies, and governance systems. We've spent most of our history fighting each other rather than uniting against external threats. If we wanted to be conquerors, we'd have needed to conquer ourselves first." Reek made the Zelthri sound of amusement. "The same is true for Zelth. Our evolutionary history produced 12 distinct subspecies before modern times. We spent millennia perfecting the art of cooperation across biological differences before we ever looked to the stars." Ambassador Galarex, sensing a diplomatic opportunity, raised his appendages for attention. "Perhaps a practical demonstration would be beneficial. Captain Carter, Envoy Varisa, would your delegations be willing to participate in a cultural and scientific exchange program? A controlled environment where we can all learn from each other without assumptions or fear." Captain Carter grinned. "Love it. We've got scientific data on thousands of Earth species, engineering solutions for everything from deep ocean to vacuum survival, and enough cultural artifacts to keep your anthropologists busy for decades. Plus, I make a mean chili that'll test even Zelthri heat tolerance." Varisa performed an elegant gesture of agreement. The Zelthri would welcome such an exchange. We can share our advances in radiation-resistant materials, gravitational adaptation technologies, and perhaps even some safely diluted examples of our art forms. The tension in the chamber visibly decreased as practical matters replaced abstract fears. Federation representatives began approaching both Deathworld delegations with specific questions and proposals, the initial terror giving way to professional curiosity. Admiral Marenk remained skeptical, but even he had to admit there was no immediate threat. He approached Captain Carter directly. "Your species believes in, what did you call it? Keeping your friends close and your enemies closer?" he asked quietly. Carter smiled. "Something like that. Though in this case, I'd rather not operate on the assumption we're enemies. Let's start with unknown variables and work our way toward friends, shall we?" The Admiral studied her for a moment. "You're either remarkably sincere or the most dangerous diplomat I've ever encountered. Why not both?" Carter replied with a wink. Across the chamber, the Federation security officer who had sampled the Zelthri seasoning was recovering, looking embarrassed but enlightened. The medical team had confirmed no lasting damage, merely an intense physiological response. "I don't understand," the officer said to Reek. "You said this was mild." Suitable for your children? Precisely. Reconfirmed. Our nervous systems develop early resistance to environmental toxins. What you experienced would be considered a pleasant warmth to a Zelthri youngling. And the human, Captain Carter, she consumed it without distress. Reek's scales shifted in what might have been the equivalent of a shrug. Humans continue to defy categorization. I believe they've deliberately trained themselves to enjoy sensations that should be warnings of danger. Fascinating adaptation strategy. Meanwhile, Dr. Sorovia was organizing what would soon become the most comprehensive xenobiology database in Federation history. She flitted between the human and Zelthri delegates, recording physiological data, environmental tolerances, and evolutionary adaptations. Your endocrine system, she marveled while scanning one of the human crew, produces stress hormones that actually improve your short-term performance. And these adrenaline junkie individuals you described deliberately seek situations that trigger this response. Exactly, the crew member confirmed. Some humans climb mountains without safety equipment, jump out of perfectly functional aircraft, or swim with predators just to feel that rush. Personally, I prefer hot sauce competitions. Same endorphin kick, lower mortality rate. Nearby, Ambassador Galarex was deep in conversation with Captain Carter and Varisa, discussing the formal integration of both species into the galactic community. The Federation Council will need to create entirely new classification categories, he explained. Our existing frameworks never anticipated functional civilizations from Category 9 plus environments, let alone peaceful ones seeking diplomatic relations. Maybe that's your first lesson from us Deathworlders, Carter suggested. Never underestimate the power of intelligence to overcome environmental limitations. On Earth, we went from primitive tools to space travel in a cosmic eye blink because necessity is one hell of a motivator. Varisa added, the same principle guided Zelthri development. When your world regularly tries to eradicate you with cataclysms, you either innovate rapidly or perish. We chose innovation. And cooperation, Carter added. Can't forget that part. The lone survivor trope makes for good entertainment, but real survival happens in communities. Ambassador Galarex found himself genuinely impressed, not just by their resilience, but by their philosophical depth. These weren't mindless survivors or battle-hardened warriors. They were thoughtful beings who had transcended their harsh origins to seek something greater. The informal gathering continued for hours, with Federation representatives gradually relaxing as they realized neither Deathworld species intended harm. Quite the contrary, both seemed genuinely excited about cultural and scientific exchange. As the formal reception began to wind down, a group of humans and Zelthri were comparing notes on what constituted extreme sports on their respective worlds. So you're telling me, said Reek in disbelief, that humans willingly attach themselves to elastic cords and jump from high structures, relying solely on the cord's tension to prevent fatal impact. Bungee jumping, confirmed one of the human crew enthusiastically. It's amazing. That moment of free fall, when you're sure you're going to die, but also completely alive. Nothing like it. And this serves no practical purpose? Asked another Zelthri. No training value? No resource acquisition? Pure fun, the human said with a grin. Though I suppose you could argue it helps us face fear in a controlled environment. The Zelthri exchanged glances that conveyed clear amazement. On Zelth, we have the Fireflow navigation ritual, where one must cross a field of geothermal vents during an eruption cycle. But this serves as both coming-of-age ceremony and practical training for emergency evacuations. That sounds awesome, the human exclaimed. Could tourists try it, or would we just become barbecue? The conversation continued in this vein, with each description of recreational activities causing greater astonishment on both sides. Federation representatives listening and grew increasingly convinced that both species were, in the words of one junior diplomat, evolutionarily insane, but in complementary ways. As the event concluded, Captain Carter and Varisa found themselves standing beside a large viewing portal, gazing out at the stars while Federation officials made arrangements for continued diplomatic proceedings. Funny how things work out, Carter mused. Our scientists always debated whether we'd find anyone else out there who could understand what it means to come from a world that never stops trying to kill you. Varice's scales shifted in a pattern that humans would soon learn indicated contemplation. The Zelthari philosophers have a concept, Tlexkith, which translates roughly as the wisdom born from surviving the unsurvivable. I believe humans understand this inherently. We call it what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, Carter replied with a smile. Less poetic, but same idea. Perhaps that is the greatest gift our peoples can offer the Federation, Varice suggested. Not just our technologies or biological adaptations, but our perspective, the understanding that perceived limitations can become the foundation for unprecedented strengths. Captain Carter nodded, watching as her crew mingled with the Zelthari delegation, already exchanging stories and ideas like old friends despite their radically different biologies. You know what's really going to blow their minds? She said with a mischievous grin. Wait until they find out about the other Deathworld species we've been in contact with. The Mroshi make both our planets look like vacation resorts. Varice's iridescent scales rippled with interest. You've encountered others? Let's just say the galaxy is a lot more lively than the Federation realizes, Carter replied. But that's a diplomatic bombshell for another day. One perspective-shattering revelation at a time, right? Across the chamber, Admiral Marenk watched the two Deathworlders with a mixture of lingering suspicion and growing curiosity. He leaned toward Dr. Sorovia, who was still organizing her unprecedented collection of xenobiological data. They're plotting something, he muttered. Sorovia's feathers rustled in the avian equivalent of exasperation. Yes, Admiral. They're plotting to share spicy food recipes and extreme sports techniques. Truly, the Federation is doomed. Mock if you must, Doctor, but mark my words, the arrival of these Deathworlders changes everything. On this point, at least, the Admiral was entirely correct. 6 standard Federation cycles later, the Galactic High Council convened in an extraordinary session. The chamber, once filled with apprehension at the mere mention of Deathworld species, now hosted representatives from both humans and Zelthari, seated with full diplomatic status. Ambassador Galarex, who had guided the integration process from first contact, addressed the assembled representatives. Distinguished colleagues, we gather today to formally recognize the unprecedented contributions of our newest members. In the brief time since their arrival, the Human Zelthari Collaborative Sciences Division has revolutionized our approach to hostile environment adaptation. Holographic displays activated around the chamber, showing the remarkable achievements. Federation colony worlds previously deemed marginally habitable now thrived with adapted technologies. Medical treatments derived from Deathworld biochemistry had cured diseases thought untreatable. Educational exchange programs had flourished, with Federation species studying on specialized habitats within both Earth and Zelth. More significant than these technological exchanges, Galarex continued, has been the philosophical shift within our community. The concept of insurmountable environmental limitations has been thoroughly challenged. Captain Alicia Carter, now serving as Earth's official ambassador, caught Varice's eye across the chamber and gave a subtle nod. Their private wager, about how quickly they could transform the Federation's institutional caution into bold exploration, had been won by Varice by a mere half-cycle. Admiral Marenk, whose initial suspicion had gradually transformed into grudging respect, rose to address the Council. As head of Federation security, I must acknowledge what once seemed impossible. Our defensive capabilities have been enhanced beyond measure through cooperation with species evolved in conditions we once feared. The joint Human Zelthari emergency response teams have saved countless lives during natural disasters across 17 worlds. Dr. Sorovia, now directing the Federation's expanded Xenobiology division, practically vibrated with excitement as she presented her findings. The evolutionary principles we've documented from Deathworld adaptations have revealed entirely new branches of biological science. But perhaps most remarkable has been the psychological resilience both species bring to challenges, what they call the Deathworld mindset, a belief that obstacles exist to be overcome rather than avoided. As the formal proceedings continued, a small group gathered in a side chamber for a more personal celebration. Captain Carter, still preferring her original title despite her ambassadorial role, raised a glass containing a beverage that would be toxic to most Federation species. To impossible things, she toasted, and to proving that impossible is just a word for something you haven't figured out yet. Varisa raised her own drinking vessel, containing a liquid that glowed faintly with bioluminescent properties. To the wisdom of death worlds and the strength found in unlikely friendships. Reek, now heading the cultural exchange program, added, and to the Federation officials who fainted when they discovered human recreational swimming involves voluntary immersion in dihydrogen monoxide. The gathering laughed. Humans with their characteristic vocal expressions, Zelthari with their untranslatable but now familiar sounds of amusement. Around them, Federation representatives who had once feared their very presence now joined in, having learned that Deathworld humor, like everything else about these remarkable species, was surprisingly infectious. Outside the council chambers, on a specially constructed observation deck, a group of human and Zelthari children played together under the watchful eyes of their caretakers. They had been born after first contact, growing up with the knowledge that despite their different biologies, they shared a common heritage as beings who had evolved to thrive where others could not survive. A young human girl and a Zelthari youngling were engaged in what appeared to be an improvised game, combining elements of human tag with Zelthari reflex training. Their laughter, one familiar, one alien, both joyful, echoed through the chamber. That, Captain Carter said softly, nodding toward the children, is the real victory. Not the technology or the science or even the diplomacy. It's the fact that the next generation won't see differences as threats. Varisa's scales shifted in a pattern of deep satisfaction. Indeed, on Zelth we have a proverb. The strongest metal is forged in the hottest fire, but shaped by the wisest hands. Perhaps that is the true legacy of Deathworlders. Not merely surviving adversity, but learning to create something beautiful from it. As the celebration continued into the night, the stars outside seemed to shine a little brighter, as if acknowledging a truth that had always existed. That sometimes the harshest beginnings lead to the most remarkable destinations, and the most unexpected friendships can arise between those who understand what it means to face the impossible and smile.